Have you ever noticed something strange about old buildings? Why do some have windows, doors, or even entire floors hidden beneath the ground? Is it just quirky architecture, or evidence of something far more mysterious buried in our past? Today we'll dig into the mystery behind these buried buildings. Archaeologists and historians have a few explanations for why buildings end up buried. Sometimes new cities were built on the ruins of old ones. In ancient Troy, for example, 9 cities were built one on top of the other, each layer burying the previous one. In Rome, after fires or collapse, they simply leveled the rubble and built new structures a meter higher. Over centuries, this raised the ground level, and today, the Roman Forum lies about 10 meters below the modern city. Other times, natural events buried buildings, volcanic ash covered Pompeii, and mudslides or floods have hidden towns under layers of mud. And, as years pass, wind and rain deposit dust and soil bit by bit. Abandoned walls crumble, garbage and sediment fill in, and eventually even the biggest buildings can vanish under dirt. Those are the textbook explanations. But do they really explain why relatively recent buildings, only a century or two old, are buried up to their windows? Modern cities haven't existed long enough to accumulate meters of soil naturally. Normal urban debris might add a few centimeters per century, not bury an entire floor. And if a building had slowly sunk into soft ground, we'd see cracked walls and uneven floors, yet many of these buried structures are perfectly intact, just submerged. Some suggest these windows below ground were always meant as basement lights or storage openings. It's true that 19th century architects often included small basement windows near street level, but take a closer look. In many cases, those half-hidden openings are the exact same shape and style as the windows above. They weren't simply tiny cellar vents, they were full-sized windows and doors now stuck in the soil. Why would architects around the world design beautiful first-floor entrances and windows only to bury them? The official stories don't quite add up. There are bizarre clues on these buildings themselves. One of them is the bricks. In numerous buried structures, the bricks used in the lower, hidden walls are larger than standard modern bricks. Cities like Moscow, Prague, and St. Petersburg all have old buildings from before the 1830s with oversized bricks in the submerged sections. Above ground, you see the newer, smaller brickwork. Below ground, the bricks suddenly get bigger. It's as if the lower parts were built in an earlier era by people with different building standards, perhaps an earlier civilization entirely. Could these larger bricks be evidence that the bottom of the building is older than the top? It's a question that makes historians uneasy. We also find doors and windows that lead nowhere, sealed doorways underground, and window arches staring into solid earth. In many old photographs, you can see that what's now called a basement was originally at ground level. Decorative windows and tall door frames that once opened to the street are now half buried by pavement. If they were meant to be basements, why are their windows the same size and style as the floor above? Why build a grand door only to have half of it below ground? It looks more like the street rose up around the building after it was built. Now we'll look at some real-life examples to try and understand this mystery better. Let's start in Omsk, Siberia, a city far from any known ancient ruins. On Lenin Street, restoration work in a 19th century building uncovered a surprise below the sidewalk. This building, known as the CHERNOVIN house, was built in the mid-1800s. For decades, people thought it just had a small basement. But when workers dug around the foundation to waterproof it, they uncovered sealed-up windows and even a doorway 3 meters below today's street level. The entire first floor had been buried in clay. Old photos from the 19th century show that back then, those basement windows were at ground level, letting light and air into the rooms. Now they sit in darkness, sealed behind soil and bricks. The red brick walls, the arches above the windows, everything down there is perfectly preserved. Its structure is level and strong. There's no cracking, no sign of collapse. It's as if the ground around it simply rose and engulfed it. No local records tell of any flood or disaster that put Omsk under mud. So how did an entire floor of a busy city street get buried? Amazingly, on the same street, the city's Fine Arts Museum had a similar story. During renovations, the OMSK VRUBEL Museum exposed a hidden underground gallery with windows facing what used to be open air. Researchers found that the builders had installed prism glass in the sidewalk above, designed to channel sunlight down into those now buried windows. In other words, at some point the ground level became so high that they needed glass prisms to light what used to be the ground floor. Did the architects plan for the street to rise, or did later generations add those prisms after the fact, trying to cope with a city that mysteriously gained a layer of earth? Either way, Omsk's buried windows hint that something literally covered the city in a layer of soil when no one was looking. But this isn't just happening in Siberia. In central Moscow, near the Kremlin, stands the Polytechnic Museum, built in the late 19th century. When restorers began work on the museum's foundation, they expected the stone footings to go a few meters deep. That's normal for a large building, maybe up to 4 or 5 meters, for a solid foundation. Instead, they kept digging and digging until they found the brick walls extended 18 meters underground before hitting the base. 18 meters, that's a building 6 stories tall, entirely hidden below ground level. The lower sections weren't rough, unfinished foundation stones either. They were clean, smooth brick and stone, just like you'd see above ground. Why would anyone build walls that deep? The official explanation given was to protect from the frost, because Russian winters freeze the ground. But frost in Moscow only reaches about 2 meters down, not 18. Going maybe 3 or 4 meters deep would be plenty for a foundation in the 1800s. So what were these extra 15 meters of walls for? No one really has a good answer. It's as if the museum sits on something much older, or was meant to connect to underground levels we know nothing about. Throughout Moscow and St. Petersburg, people have noticed similar abnormalities. Stand on a main street and look down a side alley. You might see an old fancy window or arch at sidewalk level, or even lower. Many of these imperial-era buildings show signs of having their original ground floors sunken or filled in. In St. Petersburg, some of the stunning 18th century palaces along the Neva River have half-buried basement doors that perfectly mirror the design of the main floor above. Legends even claim that Peter the Great, who founded St. Petersburg in 1703, was actually uncovering a city that was already there, buried in mud. It sounds unbelievable, but when you wander the streets and see window after window at ground level, you start to wonder if part of this elegant old city really was dug out of the ground. Now moving to Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. Unlike Russia, Yerevan isn't built on a swamp or a floodplain. It's a highland city surrounded by mountains. There's no big sea or river that could flood it with mud. Yet even here, the same mystery appears. If you walk through the older districts of Yerevan, you'll see whole first floors below street level. Buildings from the 1950s, not ancient at all, have windows half under the pavement. In some places, even the second floor is partly underground, like the street rose up 2 or 3 meters along the facade. Residents ended up with what look like basements, but if you peel back the soil, you find the front doors and full windows of a ground floor that once was. How could an entire district get buried in just a few decades? There are no records of a catastrophic flood dumping tons of mud on Yerevan. The city isn't built on unstable marshland that would cause it to sink. And yet, here it is, another city where you literally have to go down a flight of stairs to enter what used to be the ground floor. If natural accumulation of dust and dirt takes centuries to cover something, what covered Yerevan's neighborhoods so fast? Not all buried buildings are modern. Some go back to ancient times, reminding us that entire worlds lie beneath our feet. In Naples, Italy, under the San Lorenzo Maggiore Church, you can walk down below the crypt and find a hidden world from long ago. Under the church, archaeologists uncovered a complete marketplace of the old Roman city. Stone streets with wheel ruts, shop stalls, ovens and storage rooms. It's like a miniature city hidden directly under the busy modern streets of Naples. All of it was buried neatly underground, forgotten for centuries until its discovery. The church above was built around 1265, long after the Roman Empire, so clearly by that time the ancient market was already buried and lost. What could have buried an entire district of a city? Some layer of soil 10 feet thick covered everything, sealing it like a time capsule. Historians believe debris from earthquakes and floods gradually filled in the old Roman streets, and new medieval buildings rose on top. It makes you wonder, if a whole bustling market can disappear beneath a city without people remembering, what else might be hidden just below our everyday footsteps? Sometimes, we do know how a city ended up with buried streets, because people did it on purpose. One striking example is Seattle in the United States. Today, if you tour downtown Seattle, you can actually walk through an underground grid of old streets and storefronts beneath the modern sidewalks. These aren't ancient, they're from the late 1800s. So how did Seattle end up with an entire underground city? In 1889, a massive fire destroyed most of downtown Seattle, which at the time was built at a low elevation near the tidal flats. City leaders decided that when they rebuilt, they would solve a big problem: frequent flooding and backed up sewage that plagued the old streets. Their solution was bold. They literally rebuilt the city one level higher than before. They constructed new roads on top of tall retaining walls, raising the street level by 10 to 15 feet. For a while, building owners kept using their old ground floor entrances, which were now well below the new street height. Imagine climbing down ladders from the street to reach the front door of a shop. Eventually, the spaces between the old and new streets were filled in, and what used to be first floors became basements. The sidewalks had glass skylights with purple tinted prism glass to let light down below. Seattle basically buried its own downtown to protect itself from water, and in doing so, left behind a perfectly preserved time capsule under the pavement. Today, it's a tourist attraction called the Seattle Underground. Seattle's case wasn't a mystery. It was a planned engineering feat recorded in the history books. But it shows that in just a short time, an entire layer of a city can be covered up and forgotten by the public above. Which leads us to wonder, in other cities, did something similar happen, but without the official records? Another American mystery lies under the streets of San Francisco. During the gold rush of the 1850s, San Francisco's harbor was jammed with old sailing ships used by fortune seekers to reach California. According to legend, many of these ships were deliberately sunk along the shoreline and then used as landfill to create more buildable land. To this day, when foundations are dug in San Francisco's financial district, construction crews occasionally find timbers and hulls of old 19th century ships beneath the streets. Officially, the story is that entrepreneurs buried ships on purpose to fill in the bay and extend the city. But some researchers raise an eyebrow at that story. Ships were valuable property, so why would so many be simply abandoned and buried? Some of the ships found were full of supplies, even cannons, as if they were caught in a hurry or disaster. A few theorists suggest these ships might have already been inland, washed there by an unknown flood, or left high and dry by a sudden receding sea, and early city builders just built over them. It's a controversial idea, but it's intriguing when you consider that entire ships now literally sit under office buildings. Whether man-made or natural, something put those ships underground, and it happened just as San Francisco was booming into a major city. Looking at all these examples together, in Russia, Europe, Asia, and the Americas, a provocative question emerges. Did a global disaster take place a few centuries ago that we've forgotten about? It might sound far-fetched, but consider the pattern. So many cities show signs of a sudden burying of ground floors, roughly in the 1700s to 1800s. In the early 19th century, strange things were recorded. Huge earthquakes in 1811 and 1812, called the New Madrid quakes, made the Mississippi River flow backwards. In 1816, the sky turned dark and red. That year was called the year without a summer because a volcano erupted. People also reported unusual mud rain falling from the sky in different parts of the world. There are even reports from the early 20th century of a rusty red dust that fell like rain over vast areas, coating the land in a fine layer of silt. What if sometime in that turbulent period, a massive environmental event blanketed parts of the world in mud or ash, enough to bury the lower levels of cities? Unlike a violent flash flood, which would knock buildings over, a gentler settling of mud and dust from the sky might slowly pile up and preserve structures rather than destroy them. It sounds unbelievable, but it would explain how windows and doors ended up quietly buried, with people simply moving to the floor above and carrying on. Others speculate about a lost civilization that came before us. They propose that many of these impressive old buildings with their oversized bricks and ornate stonework were actually built by an advanced society, sometimes referred to as Tartarians, that existed globally and was wiped out in a cataclysm. In this theory, the reason we see consistent architectural styles and buried first floors from St. Petersburg to Seattle is because the world was unified by this civilization, and a great flood of mud essentially hit the reset button on them in the 18th or 19th century. The survivors, or the next wave of settlers, might have found the half-buried structures and dug them out, repurposing them as their own. That's why, in this speculative narrative, we woke up in the 1800s with cities already there, but no memory of building them, because our ancestors inherited them. It's a mind-bending idea, and mainstream historians don't buy it. They point instead to the more mundane explanations, such as gradual accumulation, local floods, or human remodeling of terrain. But the fact remains, nowhere in the official records of these cities does it clearly explain why so many structures of the 18th and 19th centuries ended up under the earth. Maybe there was a massive flood, or a series of mudslides that struck around the world. Maybe a volcano half a planet away blanketed the skies with ash and silt that rained down for weeks. Or perhaps an earthquake liquefied the ground under cities, causing buildings to sink evenly into the muck. Or could it be something even stranger, an event so beyond our experience that our history books simply skipped over it? What we know for sure is that the evidence is literally under our feet. Those sealed windows and doors we pass on the street are silent witnesses to a change in the landscape. This makes many people ask questions. Was the street always this high, or did something raise it up? When you see a window at sidewalk level, think about what might lie behind it. Maybe an old storefront or a family's parlor room now filled with soil. Entire rooms, buildings, even whole city blocks from a previous time could be entombed right beneath today's sidewalks, just waiting to be discovered. We might just be the latest layer on a much deeper city. Our modern world could be built upon the ruins and even the rooftops of a world before us. The mystery of the buried buildings forces us to consider that our history, as recorded, might be missing a chapter. After all, if entire marketplaces, multi-story buildings, and city streets can disappear under new ones without us realizing, what else might we be missing about our past? So next time you stroll through an old neighborhood and notice a half-sunken door or a window at ground level, I encourage you to stop and ask yourself, did the ground rise, or did the building fall? Are we truly the first to build our cities, or are we walking on the literal foundations of a forgotten era? The earth doesn't give up its secrets easily, but piece by piece, we're unearthing clues that suggest we might not know the whole story of our own cities. Keep your eyes open and stay curious. Sometimes the past isn't buried in textbooks. It's buried right under your feet. Subscribe for more mysteries, and as always, keep digging. You never know what you might uncover next.